Priya Nolan had fixed broken radios, dead televisions, and countless devices that experts had given up on. But she had never expected to fix anything in space. The shuttle docked with a gentle bump, and Priya grabbed her small bag. Through the window, she could see the Galactic Translation Bureau stretching out like a city floating in the void. 200 species used this station to communicate with each other. Every treaty, every trade deal, every peace agreement passed through here first, and humanity had just earned the right to send one person. Her, not a diplomat, not a scientist, just a technician from a repair shop in Mumbai who happened to score well on the exchange program test. The airlock opened, and Priya stepped into a corridor filled with beings she had only seen in photographs. A tall creature with silver skin and too many eyes walked past without looking at her. A group of small furry aliens whispered to each other while pointing at her with their tails. She followed the signs toward the main office, trying not to stare at everything that a young alien with orange fur and large ears nearly bumped into her. He stopped and looked at her with curious eyes. "You are the human," he said. His voice was high and soft. "That is me," Priya replied. "I am Quillen. I am an intern here." He tilted his head. "You are very small for a deathworlder." Priya smiled. She had heard that humans were called deathworlders because Earth was considered extremely dangerous. "We come in different sizes." Quillen walked with her toward the main chamber. "Everyone is talking about you. They say humans are very new to space, very young as a species." "We are," Priya admitted. "Some think you will not be useful here. The work is very complex." Priya did not take offense. She had heard worse from customers who did not believe a young woman could fix their electronics. She always proved them wrong. The main chamber was enormous. Hundreds of workstations filled the space, each staffed by aliens of different shapes and colors. Giant screens displayed symbols and patterns that made no sense to Priya. The air hummed with the sound of translation machines working constantly. In the center of the room stood a raised platform where the most senior linguists worked. Priya could see a tall being with dark blue skin and 4 arms gesturing dramatically. His voice carried across the chamber. "This is beyond anything we have encountered. The pattern structure defies all known linguistic models." Quillen leaned close to Priya. "That is Thelix. He is the greatest linguist in the Bureau. 17 academic awards. He has been working on a mysterious transmission for 3 months." Priya watched Thelix with interest. He was clearly frustrated. His 4 hands kept moving, pulling up data on floating screens and dismissing it just as quickly as an ancient-looking alien with a shell-like body approached Priya. Her movements were slow and careful. "You are the human technical support," she said. It was not a question. "Yes, I am Priya Nolan. I am Director Sonari. I have led this bureau for 400 years. In that time, we have never failed to translate a message." She paused. "Until now." Priya looked at the screens, showing the mysterious transmission. It looked like random noise to her, but she knew better than to say that. "Your job is simple," Director Sonari continued. "Maintain the equipment. Do not interfere with the linguistic work. The experts will handle the actual translation." "Understood," Priya said. She was given a small toolkit and assigned to the maintenance team. For the next several hours, she walked around the chamber, checking power connections and cleaning dust from cooling vents. Nobody spoke to her. Nobody asked for her help, but Priya watched everything. She noticed that the translation console near Thelix had a flickering status light. It blinked yellow instead of steady green. In her experience, that usually meant something was wrong with the power supply. She thought about mentioning it, but remembered Director Sonari's words. "Do not interfere." Still, she made a mental note as the day cycle ended. An alarm sounded across the station. Quillen appeared at her side, his fur standing up with worry. "Emergency council meeting," he explained. "The transmission is from a sector where 2 empires are about to go to war. If we cannot translate it, millions might die." Priya felt her stomach tighten. This was not a broken radio. This was not a television that would not turn on. Lives depended on solving this puzzle. She followed the crowd toward the council chamber, staying at the back where the junior staff belonged. On the main screen, the mysterious transmission played on loop. Symbols and sounds that no one could understand. Thelix stood before the council, his 4 arms hanging in defeat. "I have consulted every linguistic database in the galaxy," he said. "This code follows no known pattern. It may not be a language at all. It may be something else entirely. One council member suggested it was a message from another dimension. Another proposed it was an ancient paradox language that could not logically exist. Priya listened to all the theories. They were brilliant. They were creative. They were incredibly complex. But she kept thinking about that flickering yellow light in her grandmother's repair shop. There was a saying painted on the wall. Before you take it apart, make sure it is plugged in. Most problems were simpler than smart people made them. Priya said nothing. She was just a technician. What did she know about impossible codes? But as the council meeting ended with no solution, she could not shake the feeling that everyone was looking in the wrong direction. The answer might be sitting right in front of them. They just were not seeing it. 3 weeks passed, and the mysterious transmission remained unsolved. Priya had learned the rhythms of the Translation Bureau. She knew which corridors were busy at which hours. She knew which species preferred silence and which ones greeted everyone they passed. She knew that Quillen always ate his meals alone because the other interns thought he asked too many questions. She also knew that Thelix had not slept in 6 days. The great linguist looked terrible. His blue skin had faded to a grayish color. His forearms moved slowly, as if they weighed too much. But he refused to rest. The transmission haunted him. Priya was cleaning a ventilation panel near his workstation when she heard him talking to himself. The consonant clusters make no sense. The vowel patterns shift without logic. It is as if the language was designed to be impossible. She kept working, pretending not to listen. A group of senior linguists gathered around Felix's station. They came from different species, but they all had the same look of exhaustion and confusion. Perhaps we are approaching this wrong, said a thin alien with feathers covering her head. What if the transmission is not meant to be understood? What if it is a test? A test of what? Felix asked. Intelligence. Patience. Maybe the message is that some things cannot be decoded. Felix shook his head. No, there is meaning here. I can feel it. We are just missing something. Another linguist, a being made of what looked like living stone, spoke in a deep, rumbling voice. I have analyzed the mathematical foundations of the code. The patterns exist in a state that should not be possible. They loop back on themselves. They contradict their own rules. Paradox linguistics, the feathered alien whispered. A language that cannot exist because it breaks the laws of information. Priya paused her cleaning. She had heard this theory before. It sounded very smart, very complex, but the flickering light on the console still bothered her. She had checked the maintenance logs. 6 months ago, there had been a power surge on this level. The console had been shut down for repairs. According to the records, everything had been reconnected properly, but the light said otherwise. Priya wanted to say something. She opened her mouth, but then she remembered how the aliens had looked at her when she arrived. The sideways glances. The whispers about humans being too young and too simple to contribute. She closed her mouth and went back to cleaning. That evening, Director Sonari called another emergency meeting. The council chamber was packed with linguists, diplomats, and military advisors. The two empires on the edge of war had given the Bureau a deadline. 3 more days. If the transmission was not decoded by then, they would assume the worst and begin fighting. We need to consider that this message may be a weapon, a military advisor said. A code designed specifically to confuse and delay us. Or it could be a cry for help, another voice argued. A civilization trying to reach us with their last breath. The room erupted in debate. Everyone had theories. Everyone had ideas. None of them involved checking the equipment. Priya stood at the back of the room, her arms crossed. Quillen appeared beside her. You look frustrated, he said quietly. I am fine. Quillen studied her face with his large eyes. You have been staring at the main console for 3 weeks. You think something is wrong with it. Priya hesitated. I am just a technician. These are the greatest linguistic minds in the galaxy. What do I know? You know something, Quillen pressed. I have watched you watch them. You see something they do not. Priya sighed. On Earth, when something does not work, we check the simple things first. Is it plugged in? Is the power working? Is there a loose connection? And you think there is a loose connection? I think the console has been showing a warning light for 6 months and nobody has looked at it because everyone assumes the problem must be complicated. Quillen was silent for a moment. Then he said something that surprised her. Why do humans check the simple things first? Priya thought about it. Because on Earth, most problems are simple. A broken wire. A dead battery. A part that came loose. We learn very young that the obvious answer is usually the right one. On my world, Quillen said slowly, we learn the opposite. Problems are always complex. Simple answers are considered naive. Childish. Maybe that is why you have been staring at this transmission for 3 months. Quillen's ears flattened against his head. He was not offended. He was thinking. The meeting ended without a solution. The council gave Thelix permission to try increasingly extreme methods. There was talk of bringing in psychic species who could feel language instead of reading it. There was discussion of building new machines that operated on different physics. The solutions kept getting bigger and more complicated, and the little yellow light kept flickering. Priya walked back to her quarters alone. She passed the console and stopped. Everyone else had gone to rest or continue their research. The chamber was empty. She looked at the light. She looked at the cable running from the console to the wall. She should not interfere. That was her order, but 3 days from now, millions of people might die because nobody thought to check the obvious. Priya made a decision. She would come back tonight, and she would check. The station was never truly dark, but it grew quiet during the rest cycle. The lights dimmed to a soft blue, and most of the staff disappeared into their quarters. The translation chamber, which buzzed with activity during working hours, became almost peaceful. Priya walked through the empty space, her footsteps echoing on the metal floor. She carried her toolkit in one hand and a small flashlight in the other. She told herself she was just doing her job, checking equipment, maintaining systems. Nothing unusual about that. But her heart was beating faster than normal. She reached the main console and crouched down behind it. The flickering yellow light cast strange shadows on the wall. Up close, she could see a thin layer of dust on some of the cables. That was normal for equipment that had been running for months. But one cable looked different. Priya traced it with her flashlight. It ran from the translation matrix, a glowing blue box that processed all incoming signals, down to a power coupling in the floor. The connection looked solid. She followed the cable further. Behind the console, hidden from normal view, the cable split into 2 branches. One branch was connected to the main power grid. The other was supposed to connect to a secondary processing unit. Supposed to. Priya stared at the disconnected end. It was just hanging there, loose, less than a centimeter from where it should be plugged in. A tiny gap, invisible unless you were looking for it. She remembered the maintenance logs. 6 months ago. Power surge. Console shut down. Repairs completed. Someone had forgotten to plug this back in. For 6 months, the translation matrix had been running on partial power. It was still working, but not at full capacity. Every analysis, every calculation, every attempt to decode the impossible transmission had been done with the machine operating at maybe half its strength. Priya felt a laugh building in her chest. She pressed her hand over her mouth to keep it from escaping. 3 months. The greatest minds in the galaxy. Theories about paradox languages and dimensional messages and tests from ancient civilizations. And it was a loose cable. She was about to plug it in when she heard footsteps. She spun around, her heart jumping. Quillen stood at the edge of the shadows. His large eyes reflected the light from her flashlight. I knew you would come back, he said. Priya stood up slowly. I was just checking the equipment. Did you find something? She hesitated. Then she pointed at the loose cable. Look. Quillen moved closer and crouched down to see. His ears rose in surprise. It is disconnected, he said. For 6 months, probably. But the machine is still running. On backup power. Limited capacity. Priya picked up the cable end. The translation matrix has been doing its job with half its brain tied behind its back. Quillen was quiet for a long moment. Priya could see him processing what this meant. All those failed attempts. All those brilliant theories. All that wasted time. Plug it in, he said finally. Priya connected the cable. It clicked into place with a satisfying sound. The yellow light on the console turned green. A new hum filled the air as the translation matrix powered up fully. They both turned to look at the main screen. The mysterious transmission was still displayed there, looping endlessly. The same symbols and sounds that had baffled everyone for months. But now, as the matrix worked at full power, something began to change. The symbols started to shift, to organize themselves, to form patterns that actually made sense. Words began appearing on the screen. Priya felt her knees go weak. It is working, Quillen whispered. It is actually working. The translation continued, faster now. Sentences formed. The sounds of the transmission matched up with the text appearing on screen. What had seemed like random noise was becoming clear speech. Priya and Quillen watched in silence as the message revealed itself that IT was not a weapon. It was not a test. It was not a paradox from another dimension. IT was a greeting. A simple, beautiful greeting from a civilization that had died 12,000 years ago. When the translation finished, there were tears in Priya's eyes. She was not sure why. Maybe because of how long this message had waited to be understood. Maybe because of how simple the solution had been. "We need to tell someone," Quillen said. Priya nodded. But she did not move. She just stood there, looking at the words on the screen. A message from across time and space. A voice from the void. Finally heard. Because someone had thought to check if the machine was plugged in, her grandmother would have been proud. By the time the rest cycle ended, half the station knew something had happened. News traveled fast in a place where 200 species lived and worked together. Whispers moved through corridors and dining halls. Something about the human. Something about the impossible code. Director Sonari called an emergency council session. Priya stood in the center of the chamber, Quillen at her side. Every seat was filled. Hundreds of eyes watched her from above. Some curious, some skeptical, some openly hostile. Felix sat in the front row. His forearms were crossed tightly against his chest. He had not spoken since learning that the transmission had been decoded overnight. By a technician. A human technician. "Explain what you did," Director Sonari said. Her voice was calm, but Priya could sense the tension beneath it. Priya took a breath. "I noticed that the translation console had a warning light that had been flickering for months. During my inspections, I traced the power cables and found that one connection had been left unplugged after maintenance 6 months ago." "That is impossible," someone said from the council seats. "Our maintenance protocols are perfect." "Apparently not," Priya replied quietly. She was not trying to be rude. It was just the truth. The room buzzed with whispered conversations. Director Sonari raised a limb for silence. "Show us," she commanded. Priya walked to the console. The crowd followed her with their eyes. She crouched down and pointed to the cable she had reconnected the night before. This was disconnected. The translation matrix was running on backup power only. It could not process the full signal. "And you plugged it in?" Felix said. His voice was flat. "Yes. And that solved the impossible code that stumped the finest minds in the galaxy." Priya met his eyes. She saw anger there, but also something else. Shame, maybe. Or confusion. "It was not impossible," she said gently. "The machine just was not working properly." Felix stood up suddenly. His forearms uncrossed and spread wide in a gesture Priya did not recognize. "This is an insult," he declared. 3 months of work. The most advanced linguistic analysis ever attempted. And you claim it was all pointless because of a cable? "Not pointless," Priya said. "Your analysis was probably correct. But even the best analysis cannot succeed if the machine processing it is broken." "It was not broken. It was running. Running poorly. There is a difference." The room fell silent. Priya realized she might have said too much. She was just a technician. These were the most respected scholars in the galaxy. Who was she to lecture them? But Director Sonari spoke before anyone else could. "Demonstrate," she said. Priya understood what she wanted. She reached behind the console and unplugged the cable she had connected last night. Immediately, the translation on the main screen began to corrupt. The clear message broke apart into chaos. The same impossible code returned. She plugged the cable back in. The message returned, clear and perfect. N01 spoke. Director Sonari rose from her seat and approached the console. She moved slowly, but her eyes were sharp. She looked at the cable. She looked at Priya. She looked at the message on the screen. 12,000 years, she said softly. This message has been traveling through space for 12,000 years, waiting to be heard. She read the words aloud. "Hello, friends among the stars. We are the Solani. We lived on a world of 3 suns in a galaxy far from yours. By the time you hear this, we will be gone. But we wanted you to know that we existed. We loved. We dreamed. We looked up at the night sky and wondered if anyone was looking back. If you are hearing this message, then we have our answer. You are out there. And that means we were never alone." Priya felt tears threatening again. She blinked them away. The chamber was absolutely still. A message from the dead. A voice from the darkness. Finally understood, because someone had checked the plug, Felix was the first to move. He walked down from the council seats and stopped in front of Priya. For a long moment, he just looked at her. Then he did something she did not expect. He bowed. All four of his arms touched the floor in what Priya recognized as the deepest gesture of respect in Varadi culture. I was arrogant, he said. I assumed that great problems require great solutions. I forgot that the universe does not care about our assumptions. Priya was not sure what to say. It was just a cable. No. Felix straightened up. It was a lesson, one I needed to learn. Director Sonari addressed the council. The diplomatic crisis is averted. The two empires have agreed to pause their conflict while we share the message with them. They wish to hear the words of the Solani for themselves. A ripple of relief passed through the chamber. As for Priya Nolan, the director continued, she will no longer be assigned to maintenance duties. Effective immediately, she is promoted to technical consultant for the Translation Bureau. Priya blinked. What? You have demonstrated a skill we lack, Director Sonari said. The ability to see what is right in front of us. We need that. Quillen grabbed Priya's arm with excitement. His ears were standing straight up. You did it, he whispered. Priya looked around the chamber. At the hundreds of aliens who had doubted her. At Felix, who had bowed before her. At the message on the screen from a civilization long dead. She had just wanted to fix something. But maybe that was exactly what the galaxy needed. Words spread faster than light. Within a week, every station in the sector had heard the story. The impossible code. The 3 months of failed analysis. The human who fixed it by plugging in a cable. Some versions of the story were accurate. Others had grown into legends where Priya had walked into the chamber, looked at the console once, and immediately solved everything. The truth was simpler and stranger, which was exactly the point. Priya found herself busy in ways she had never expected. Technicians from different species started approaching her with questions, not about linguistics or translation, but about troubleshooting. How did humans fix things? What was their process? She explained as best she could. Start with the basics. Check the power. Check the connections. Make sure all the parts are present and working before you assume something complex is wrong. Most problems have simple causes. The aliens listened with intense focus. They took notes. Some of them recorded her words. This is very strange thinking, a Maluvian engineer told her one day. On my world, simple answers are considered insults. If you solve a problem too quickly, people think you are not taking it seriously. On Earth, Priya replied, if you take too long to fix something, your customer goes to someone else. The engineer considered this. Your planet sounds stressful. It is, but it teaches you to work fast. Felix started visiting her during the evening cycle. At first, he said he wanted to understand human methodology for academic purposes. But Priya could tell there was more to it. I have 17 awards, he said one night. They were sitting in the observation deck, watching ships come and go from the station. I have published over 400 papers. I am considered the foremost expert on ancient languages in this quadrant of the galaxy. That is impressive, Priya said honestly. It means nothing. A technician with no formal training solved a problem I could not solve in 3 months. He paused. How am I supposed to process that? Priya thought carefully before answering. You were not wrong, Felix. Your analysis of the transmission was probably accurate. You were just using a tool that was not working properly. A skilled surgeon cannot operate with a broken scalpel. But I should have checked the scalpel. Yes, you should have. But your species never developed that habit. You evolved on a world where problems were complex, right? Felix nodded slowly. Our homeworld is a jungle of microscopic threats. Diseases that mutate every generation. Parasites that require months of analysis to identify. Simple solutions never worked for us. Earth is different. We have earthquakes, volcanoes, floods, predators, extreme temperatures. Everything tries to kill us fast. So we learn to think fast. Check the obvious first because you might not have time for anything else. Felix was quiet for a long time. Then he asked, can you teach me? This way of thinking. Priya smiled. It is called Occam's razor. The simplest explanation is usually the correct one. A blade for cutting away complexity. Felix mused. I like that. Over the next few weeks, Priya taught Felix everything she knew about practical troubleshooting. He taught her about linguistic patterns and the history of galactic communication. They made an unlikely pair, but somehow it worked. Quillen watched their collaboration with growing excitement. One evening, he approached them with an idea. The Bureau is too divided, he said. The linguists never talk to the technicians. The theorists never consult the practical workers. What if we created a new department? One that combines both approaches. Priya looked at Thelix. Thelix looked at Priya. It could work, she said. It might revolutionize how we approach problems, he added. They brought the proposal to Director Sonari together. She listened without interrupting, her ancient eyes studying them both. You want to formalize this partnership, she said when they finished. Yes, Priya confirmed. A pilot program. Combine theoretical analysis with practical diagnostics. Check the simple things first, but do not stop there. And if it fails, then we learn from the failure and try something different, Felix said. That is the human way, is it not? Director Sonari made a sound that might have been laughter. Very well. You have 3 months to prove this works. The Galactic Practical Solutions Division was born. It was small at first. Just Priya, Felix, Quillen, and a handful of volunteers from different species. They took on problems that had been sitting in the Bureau's backlog for years. Minor translation errors, system glitches, communication breakdowns between species who should have been able to understand each other. In every case, they started with the basics. Is everything connected? Is everything powered? Are all the parts functioning? They found loose cables. They found corrupted files. They found translation errors caused by something as simple as a misplaced symbol. Their success rate was perfect. 100%. Other stations began requesting their services. A human technician became the most sought-after consultant in the quadrant. Not for her brilliance, but for her simplicity. Within a month, the Bureau's overall efficiency had improved by 340%. Priya sat in her new office, looking at the reports. She still could not quite believe this was her life. Now got a message from a dead civilization. A loose cable. And suddenly, she was changing how the galaxy solved problems. Her grandmother would have definitely been proud. 1 year made a surprising difference. The Galactic Practical Solutions Division had grown from a small experiment into one of the most important departments in the Bureau. Priya now led a team of 30 specialists from 12 different species. They had solved problems on distant stations, prevented diplomatic crises, and trained hundreds of technicians in what had become known as the human method, but she still wore her old toolkit on her belt. Some habits were worth keeping. Felix had become her closest friend on the station. The great linguist now spent more time teaching practical skills than writing academic papers. He said it was more fulfilling. He said he was learning more than he had in the previous century. Quillen had graduated from intern to full researcher. He was working on a theory that combined human simplicity with traditional complexity. He believed it would change how the galaxy approached every problem, not just technical ones. Director Sonari had retired, but not before painting a new motto on the wall of the main translation chamber. It read simply, "Check the simple things first." Life had become routine. Almost too routine. Then a new transmission arrived. It came from beyond the edge of known space. From a region so distant that the signal had been traveling for thousands of years just to reach them. It appeared on every frequency at once, repeating endlessly. Priya was called to the main chamber immediately. The old scholars were already gathering, their old habits returning. They spoke in excited whispers about linguistic patterns and dimensional frequencies. Some of them had already begun theoretical analysis. But Priya noticed something different about this signal. "It is not complex," she said, cutting through the chatter. Everyone turned to look at her. "What do you mean?" an elderly linguist asked. "Look at the pattern. It repeats the same sequence over and over. No variations. No complexity. Just the same thing, again and again." Felix moved to her side and studied the transmission. His 4 hands moved across the controls, pulling up data. "She is right," he said slowly. "This is the simplest possible signal structure. Almost primitive. Then why can we not decode it?" someone asked. Priya watched the pattern repeat on the screen. Something tugged at her memory. Something from her days in the repair shop. "It is not a code," she said finally. "Then what is it?" "A distress signal." The chamber fell silent. "Think about it," Priya continued. "If you were stranded somewhere, if your technology was failing, if you did not know if anyone would ever hear you, would you send a complex message? No," Quillen said, understanding dawning in his eyes. "You would send the simplest thing possible, something that could not be misunderstood, something that says, 'We are here. We need help.'" Felix was already working on triangulating the signal's origin. His four hands flew across the controls faster than Priya had ever seen. "If this is a distress signal, then someone is still alive out there," he said. "Someone who has been calling for help for who knows how long." "Can we find them?" Priya asked. "Already working on it." The coordinates came through within the hour. A small moon orbiting a dead planet in a system without a name. So far from any traveled route that no one had ever thought to look there. For the first time in galactic history, a rescue mission was organized based on a translation by the Practical Solutions Division. 3 ships were sent. Priya insisted on being on one of them. The journey took 2 weeks. When they arrived, they found exactly what Priya had predicted. A crashed vessel. Ancient technology. Life signs so faint they almost missed them. Inside the ship were beings unlike any species in the known galaxy. They had survived in stasis for over 8,000 years, their distress signal running on the last dregs of their power supply. They were not impossible. They were not complex. They were just lost. And finally, someone had heard them. The rescue was broadcast across the galaxy. The story of how a simple interpretation of a simple signal had saved an entire species. How the Bureau's new approach had accomplished what the old methods never could have. Priya stood on the deck of the rescue ship as the survivors were brought aboard. They were confused, weak, grateful. They did not speak any known language, but their emotions needed no translation. Felix appeared beside her. "How did you know?" he asked. Priya watched the aliens embrace their rescuers. Beings who had waited 8,000 years for someone to understand their cry for help. "When you grow up fixing things," she said, "you learn to listen for what is really broken." Back at the station, a new plaque was added to the wall of the translation chamber. It hung beside the motto director Sonari had painted IT red. Sometimes the answer is not complex. Sometimes someone just needs help, and beneath it, in smaller letters, "In memory of the Solani, who taught us to listen." And in honor of all those still waiting to be heard. Priya walked past it every day on her way to work. Every day, she remembered the flickering yellow light, the loose cable, the message that had waited 12,000 years. The galaxy was full of mysteries. But most of them, she had learned, were not impossible. They just needed someone willing to start with the simple things.